hey, I love you, Jimmy, but if you ever stop me from protecting my wife, I would kill you. you know, we are going to continue our Q&A session. This is going to be mindset. All of these questions are either common comments or questions that I have seen on videos that I have been a part of, where I'm either teaching knife techniques or just personal protection type stuff, and then you get, questions and comments on it. So we have a list of them. I brought Jimmy out mainly because he has a similar haircut to Craig, and that's where Craig was sitting previously. So I think that that would be a good replacement. Anyways, his experience is going to allow us to deep dive some of these questions a little bit more. So it should be an interesting few questions. So what's first?
All right, first topic. I'm impressed with the design, but I don't think the untrained should draw knives in defense.
Yeah. So what this was is the introduction to the MDV for Hard to Hurt. So Icy Mike talked about that. He really liked the design, and in turn, what happened was you got, well, I mean, there's 2.1 thousand comments on it, but you got a bunch of comments that talked about whether or not somebody should be using an edge weapon in personal protection, okay, in any type of defense, whether or not it's because of skill level or because of the, say, brutality of it. So, Jimmy, what's your thoughts on?
I mean, edge weapon is it's an equalizer. From my background, most criminals, they're going to ambush you and they're going to pick somebody that they feel is smaller and weaker than them. So,
Right.
The average person doesn't have the physical skill, like fight wise, to fight off somebody 50 to 100 pounds heavier than them that already has that violent intent. And now you're playing catch up
Right.
in the situation. So,
Yeah, so based off of the comment, all I'm going to do is answer directly to anyone that has this type of hang up. The fact of the matter is it does not matter your opinion on this topic. We provide skills to individuals that seek it, and therefore, if you do not feel that that is something that you would do in a real scenario, then obviously you shouldn't carry a knife. Um, it doesn't matter how effective I can get someone to, or it doesn't matter how effective a technique is. If you don't believe in your heart that it's going to work, you're never going to use it. So the thing is that if you are starting off the conversation with you do not believe that an edge weapon should be drawn in self-defense, therefore you are never going to actually do that. That's your little world. And in that environment, you need to train a lot more to be efficient with unarmed skills than you do with an edge weapon. It's just a very simple fact. So the fact is that if you have that amount of time and dedication to be the peaceful one that walks around and never has to upgrade your violence, then that's great. But I don't have the luxury of dealing with that with a number of my students. So I have to provide what I believe is going to get them out of a scenario as quickly as possible. And an edge weapon is an excellent force multiplier, just like Jimmy's saying. And so if you have someone who's a female, who's smaller in stature, maybe she had a couple drinks, now she's surrounded by three guys, she can't run. In turn, what happens is, what techniques unarmed are you going to teach her that she's going to get out of that? Yes, you can talk about better decision making and all this other stuff, but there are scenarios that you are not able to control, in which case you're just in a bad spot. So I could just run all sorts of scenarios on why an edge weapon would be better, but that's my thoughts on that. And the thing is that I personally don't believe I have the right to withhold information that was given to me either through my experience or God-given talent or whatever it is. And so I'm going to pass that on. And so there are going to be a number of people that oppose that view, but the thing is that that lesson may not be for them.
Great. Next topic was one of the longer ones here, so I'm going to read it from my screenshots. Tell me if I'm crazy here for everyday carry. I think the best knife to carry is one that is useful for the tasks you do day to day. I understand that it will be less useful in a self defense situation than something purpose built for self defense. However, overall, it'll be more useful.
Yeah, so what you're talking about is a utility blade. Um, I go over this in a number of videos. I personally believe that you should have one blade that is meant to protect yourself, which means that you are never going to use it on anything else. Otherwise, you are running the risk of dulling that blade. And in the moment that you need it to save your life, what happens is you need that thing to be sharp. It needs to be ready to go. And this is not about just having a good people opener that will open people when you need to. We've had a number of instances where this knife has been used in emergency response scenarios, or someone has been overturned in a vehicle. And if you've ever tried to cut through a seatbelt, you know that that is not an easy task to do, and you need a very sharp knife to be able to do that. If you dulled your knife out and you try to rip through that, you're going to be there for a while. And so, if time is of the essence at that point, then you then used a blade that should never have been used for purposes it shouldn't have been used for, dulled it out, and now when you need it, it is not going to perform for you. So the idea is that if you want a utility blade, carry a utility blade. I personally believe you should carry a utility blade that is non-threatening, something that looks like a utility blade, that is focused on that. So if you ever get caught with it on you, it's really easy to explain. We talked earlier with Craig, and Craig showed that he used one of the other Skallywag folders as a utility blade, and it's all tore up and this type of thing. He also carries an MDV. So like the thing is that that wasn't actually worn out. You are absolutely correct as far as use, but I will also use the analogy of a carry pistol. A carry pistol that you have on you all the time needs to be something that is smaller, that is comfortable, that you wear all the time. It should not be something that you absolutely love over all other pistols to shoot at the range. And this is where people have a problem. What they do is they go, I like shooting this pistol. This pistol is larger. It's easier to handle. Da 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 da. Da. But when you try to carry it, it's such a pain in the ass to carry, and you never carry it, right? And so, like, the thing is that I have a snub nose 357 revolver. Do I like shooting that thing? No. But the thing is that I can wear that in anything, and what'll happen is I forget that it's on me, right? So I'm going to carry that all the time. And the reason I'm saying that is you were talking about uh, something that you're going to use all the time versus something that is specific for self-defense. I feel like it falls into the same type of category. The thing is that that carry pistol is not going to be used at the range all the time. But the thing is that you're bringing resident skill that you developed with other pistols to be able to perform with that. Do you need to be able to perform with it? Yes, but you're not going to shoot it as much as other pistols, but you'll carry it all the time. So when the moment is that you need it, it will actually perform, and you'll have it on you because it's not a freaking, Glock 17 or some shit like that. Anything?
Yeah, I carry both. So I keep one that's like specifically dedicated to self defense. I make sure, that way it's never dull, and I carry a utility knife. So, and that's what I use to open toys for my kid, cut anything I need to cut. But, if I needed to use something in a life threatening situation, I want it to be the best quality, that it can be.
All right. So one of the videos you were doing some demo on anatomy destruction, kind of neutralization of an extremity, and it was just kind of like the level that it needed to be. And one of the comments was, "Okay, why don't you gut the guy?"
Yeah, that's violent. The real answer to that is I don't believe in doing any action that is not going to be purposeful. to shut that person down. So, am I saying that, driving a blade into someone's abdomen and cutting them across and then grabbing their intestines and running in the other direction is not going to be an effective way to deal with someone? No, I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that there are plenty of cases where somebody has taken torso shots or some sort of damage to that area, whether that be with an edge weapon or with firearms, and they will continue to fight as if they never got hit. And the thing is that a lot of times they don't know that they got hit. So Jack will talk about times where he's been on many raids where he'll put, or one of his guys will put rounds directly in the guy's chest, and because they didn't hit center mass and hit the spinal column and shut them down, the guy's literally still standing there and he's dead. He doesn't know he's dead, but he is still able to perform at least one more action before that happens. So like those are dangerous scenarios, and that's where we start talking about shot placement. But the idea is that if that happens with like 5.56 rounds, then obviously if you just stick someone with a knife in their stomach or their chest, expecting them to just drop from that is a lot to ask. What I like to do is I like to go, if someone's grabbing you and I cut all the tendons directly underneath and cut all ligaments and all this other stuff, the likelihood that he's still going to be able to do this is almost zero. So like the thing is that it's a purposeful cut. And if you understand what you're doing, you can target the anatomy to shut it down so you may not have to kill that person. Like you can actually, and that's a skill-based thing, or it makes your defense much easier because you can rely on the fact that you are slowly destroying their capabilities. Okay, so now he can't use his arm as effectively. He may have been a formidable adversary at the time, but because I've shut that down, he becomes more manageable. And for those that are smaller in stature, or those that are injured, or those that are fatigued or outnumbered, or whatever you want to talk about, this is a much better approach than trying to gut them. And I know Chris has a medical background. Jimmy has a law enforcement background, so they can talk a little bit less direct about those types of things. But anything?
I just look at it as the levels of escalation. Just enough to get away, just enough to neutralize the situation is normally all that's needed. But in the case of somebody that has taken a few hits and doesn't yet know that they're neutralized, they may keep coming. You don't know that they're effectively neutralized. So the shot placement thing was another good thing that Jack's brought up before. You just, in that situation, obviously a very different situation, direct combat as opposed to just your day-to-day interaction in a civilian environment. But either way, it's a threat. And just, everybody wants to keep going home and do the family thing and be there for their folks. So I agree with the escalation until they stop.
I think movies have created a very unrealistic expectation of what happens when you do stab or shoot somebody.
Right.
Working, I spent part of my career working in LA County Jail. I've worked in state prisons also. And it's not uncommon for people to get stabbed, inmates to get stabbed by other inmates in the prison. And the vast majority of them don't die. And the vast majority of them are stabbed somewhere in the torso repeatedly, sometimes 30 to 75 times.
Right.
They just blitz and stab as many times as they can. It's kind of their go-to.
Right.
And I look at it as, a self-defense situation. If I'm able to just cut somebody, if somebody's grabbing onto me and I cut their arm and they let go of me and I can walk away from that, that's way easier to defend in court than this guy grabbed me by the shirt and I gutted him on the street.
Yeah.
And just the effectiveness of it, you're going to be far more effective, accomplishing your goal of getting that guy to let you go if you cut the tendons in his arm. And then if it got to the point where you needed to escalate that to deadly force, now you've taken one of his arms out of the game or made it less effective.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I have a I've talked about this, in the other Q and A's. I have the slides, and one of the slides, they were formerly FBI slides, and the thing is that my father built classes off of them, and one of them is someone that has all of these slash marks, stabs, like all over the body, and it's actually a couple slides, and it's over 150 stabs and slashes throughout the entire body. And the person, based off of the medical examination, everything, took over 7 minutes to die. And so that person was stabbing them and slashing them repeatedly. And obviously, this was somebody that had an emotional, involvement of that. To stab and slash anything for 7 minutes is fatiguing, just to, say the least. But talking about that, it's like because of the placement of the attacks, and because the person obviously did not know what they were doing, that person received over 150 points of damage, and they kept fighting and kept running and kept, and so like the idea that you can just put a little bit of damage on someone and it not be precisely focused on something, you are going to lose confidence in the weapon, and that's one of the things about the shot placement thing. My father had a former close combat instructor that retired. He was a Marine, and in turn, he went to Texas, and he, had his old farm there. And in this scenario, what happened was, well, he was married at the time. That'll be relevant in a second. And he had a shotgun, right? And so somebody was breaking into his house in the middle of the night. And so when they were breaking in, he made sure that they came into the house before he defended, right? And so the way that it was kind of set up was his hallway was completely blacked out if you were looking into it from the kitchen. And this is where the guy broke in. So the guy walked through the screen door, through the door as he moved in, and then he had shotgun. He's sitting down, and he says, "I fired one buckshot right through the guy's chest," and the guy had a wife beater on, and he goes, "I hit him center, wow, and he goes, I swear to God, he started walking forward. And in my mind, I was going, who is this? Does he have body armor on? Did I not hit him? But he's like, I'm seeing the actual visual thing. And so he goes, I pull the trigger again, he backs around and pulls the trigger. And because of time slowing down, the guy got hit, and he was actually not walking forward, he was falling. And when he was falling, it hit him in the face, and then his head exploded, and it went all over the place. So the thing about the marriage was he had gotten a divorce later because his wife kept finding brain particles all over. She's like, oh, it's getting dishes for Thanksgiving, and then there's gray matter there. It's anyways, that'll mess up your marriage. But the reason I said that is because his whole loss of focus was that his shotgun wasn't working. The damage that he knows it was supposed to apply wasn't there. And so one of the reasons why I focus on making sure everyone knows precisely what it should do and what you should expect, and why I don't like running drills like free grappling with a trainer where people are allowed to stab you in the head and you're not supposed to respond and you continue to beat the crap out of someone, is because you need to have confidence in the weapon system that you chose for that violent encounter. If I'm in a violent encounter and I draw a knife, I am drawing that knife because I need that knife. If I didn't need that knife, I would never draw it. It's the same thing with my pistol. At no time am I ever drawing my pistol if I don't need to shoot you.
Right.
And you present a threat that is deadly enough that I need to go to that. And if I create training or an environment where you lose confidence in those weapons, I feel as an instructor, you're doing a huge disservice. And so the thing is that, when someone is going to use that blade, I want them to know what they should expect reasonably. And in turn, I understand that if they do superficial damage and they expect a result, what's going to happen is they're going to lose confidence in it. And that person is going to get closer to you. They're going to have an opportunity. So instead of you just compounding the damage, what'll happen is you'll slow down. In sparring, you see this all the time. When somebody gets hit with like the best shot ever, instead of that person just like going fine and then continuing to rip shots, what happens is they lose confidence. And that other guy starts hitting them when they should never have been able to do that, right? I see that in grappling all the time. You get a guy that's really good at takedowns, wrestlers, judo guys, but you get a guy that's really good at submissions. And every single time the guy gets thrown, that guy taps him out immediately. Eventually, that grappler is going to start taking down the superior takedown artist. Why? Because they lost confidence. And in turn, by doing so, something that should never have happened in a million years starts to happen. And those are all lessons that are applied into, the training.
Kind of the other end of the spectrum with a comment from the previous about gutting an adversary would be, why are you teaching us this?
Because I care and love for each one of you. Honestly, it's because I believe knowledge should be shared. Unfortunately, some people possess knowledge that is a little bit darker than others, and that does not um, make that statement any different. I believe that the community that is trying to protect others by passing on good quality information should be welcoming for all types of information. Whether or not you're going to use these techniques and these tactics and these lessons learned is irrelevant, but you should be able to have it as a reference point to move off of. I have a unique background, and I have trained with some exceptional people in my time. And I feel like if I were just to only provide the information to, say, those that come to a course, it would be a disservice to the people that spent time and invested in me. And so therefore I'm going to pass that on. And so if some people are a little uneased by the fact that I'm teaching such violence, then usually those are the very people that need it more than the people that are fully accepting of it, because there's a psychological block that you have and resistance to that. And when somebody is trying to kill you or your wife or your child, you are not overcoming that resistance very quickly. Whereas if I'm the scary guy that introduces it to you through a video, at least you can start thinking about it. Therefore, it might be something that you can overcome quickly. And so that's the reason I teach what I do.
Yeah, it comes back to the body won't go where the mind's never been. If you've never even thought about using that level of violence, and then you're in a situation where that's the only thing that's going to save you and your family, you're not going to go to it because
Right.
you've never even imagined yourself doing anything like that. We see it a lot in our training where we get the shock factor when I was like, hey, I'm gonna gouge his eyeball out, and I'm not gonna poke him in the eye. I'm trying to gouge his eyeball completely out.
Right.
And people are always uneasy in the beginning of the class.
Mhm.
But usually like after a little bit of training and they start to understand the intent behind that isn't that I'm gonna gouge everybody's eyeball out. It's
Right.
that I have that skill if I'm in a situation where that's the only thing that's gonna get me out of that situation. We've had, thousands of cases around the country where, guys come in and they try to defend their family and they end up getting, or they don't. They think that, you ask every man, like, would you defend your family? Or every woman, like, would you defend your children? And the automatic answer is, yeah, I would do anything.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that capability or you've never thought about what real violence is,
Yeah.
then you're not going to make that jump in the moment,
Right.
under stress. So we see a lot of times where I like the videos that, less dark videos where Halloween, either something pops up or somebody comes out in a costume, and you'd be surprised how many people will push their kids down and run away.
Yeah.
Or run away and leave their kid behind.
Yeah,
Like that's the more the natural human response.
Oh, yeah.
The untrained natural human response is self-preservation is a huge thing.
No, absolutely, and that's and our society is built around the turn a blind eye. It's not my business.
Right.
You don't get involved. You're going to get your head cut off because you're poking your nose, somewhere that doesn't belong. All this crap. We were talking about this, I think, a couple of days ago. We were talking about it in a joking manner, just because of the banter with our significant others, but. The amount of people that will turn a blind eye when someone is making comments, or there is an actual struggle, like grabbing a girl by the back of the neck and going, "You will come with me," and no one fucking stepping in and beating the living crap out of that guy,
Right.
it's just horrifying. Because you can do that in the mall, you can say those things, in a hotel lobby, and what'll happen is people will look because it's odd, but they won't step in.
Right.
And so, like and that falls into that category. It's like it's preservation. They don't want to deal with that, and so.
I mean, if you look at school shootings where the cops stood outside for an hour and wouldn't go in,
Right.
That's self-preservation. That's all that is. It's and then they get a command from somebody a higher rank than them that like reinforces that for them.
Right.
Like, hey, we're not going in. The father or the husband of one of the teachers that had texted him like, hey, I'm in a classroom, I've been shot.
Mhm.
He showed up and they put a hand on his shoulder and that stopped him from going in. That's, in my opinion, he's never even imagined going to that level and like what he would actually do in that situation.
Correct.
He's had every cop's had like their active shooter training. This is what you do. This is how you go in. And very few of them have really sat down and been like, what's that really going to feel like? What's that really going to look like? What's reality in that situation?
Well, especially in that scenario, you are also facing the opposition of those that you respect or consider your teammates,
Right.
because you are about to go do something that you know is right, but therefore there's you're outnumbered, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
from a superior level, it's also reinforcing that. And so if you haven't thought about, hey, I love you, Jimmy, but if you ever stop me from protecting my wife, I would kill you. And I know you understand that, but like the thought is that like if you haven't mentally gone,
Right.
my guys may try to stop me, and
Yeah.
I need to know whether or not I believe that I'm in the right to move forward past that, and am I willing to push past that?
Right.
Because I'm sure that in their minds they may have been reeling, going, "Oh, what are we doing?" Because most training is, this is active shooter, this is an active shooter,
Right.
this is a scenario, this is what you do on the go.
Right.
And like it's all perfectly, and at no time do you create hey, you have a whole bunch of people saying it's not ready to move, and you are actively hearing gunshots, which means that life is at a loss. What do you do? And that there's nothing, I'm not saying anything about the officers. I know that this is a heated debate that was, when it was happening, but at the same time, when we start talking about the neck grabbing and you'll come with me and all this other stuff, I just know human nature, and I fully expect that. I know that 99% of people are not going to get involved. I understand that 99% of people have never encountered violence. They're not willing to sacrifice themselves in any fashion, whether it's just a little bit of pain, nevertheless sacrificing their life. So I'm not expecting help. It's not a surprise to me when somebody turns a blind eye. I expect it, but for somebody to think, based off questions like this or statements like this, that you are just going to, at the moment of impact, rise to the occasion, you will be forever regretting your decisions because you didn't train properly.
Yeah.